All right, welcome everybody to our Wednesday night Bible study. We are going to be continuing our Bible study as we, over the last few months, we've been following the children of Israel as they have been slaves in Egypt, how God has delivered them, and now we are right at the base of Mount Sinai, where God is organizing them into a well-organized group of people that are going to be able to march up to the promised land. When they came out of Egypt, God had not organized them. He just told them to follow Moses. But there's two reasons that I can think of why God is spending all this time to organize the children of Israel. The first one is they are going to be going through some areas that have some very avowed enemies of the Hebrew people. And if they just have people running willy-nilly through the wilderness, if you have people running ahead and the children and the weaker people and the elderly lagging behind, they're going to get attacked. And so what God does is he organizes them so that they're going to go in a very organized way. No one's going to be left behind, and things are going to be safer this way. The second reason is because as they came out of Egypt to Sinai, they were essentially a bunch of slaves that had just been freed. At Sinai, God had entered into a covenant with them to make them his people, to be a blessing to everybody on the earth. And so now, as they leave Sinai, or as they're going to be leaving Sinai soon, God is organizing them into kind of an exhibit of his people on earth. It's kind of like whenever you look at in San Francisco, sometimes you'll see children walking down the sidewalk and they're just running along and you're like, oh, they must have gotten out of school. But then whenever you see children walking single file, nice and organized, and you see the teachers there, like, oh, they're in school, they're representing their school, so to speak. And so as the children of Israel are going to be led out of Egypt, not out of Egypt, but as they're going to be led away from Mount Sinai, they're essentially proclaiming to everybody around that, hey, we belong to God, and God has a sense of order and balance, and he's very organized. And so the past few weeks, we've been talking specifically about how God has been organizing them at the base of Mount Sinai. And one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago was how God organized them around the little sanctuary. And the topic came up of banners. If you remember, what were the banners? And so Art and I had a discussion. Actually, all of us had a discussion, and Art has graciously just agreed to do a lot of homework, and he's going to share with us about the banners. So if you want to grab a piece of paper and a pencil, this is one of those areas that you might want to write this down because it's going to be a lot of information. Now, before we go to Art's presentation, I just want to let you know that this is going to be our last Wednesday night Bible study for about 3 or 4 weeks. And the reason is because a lot of our leaders are going to be going to the Philippines on this mission trip. And thankfully, Mike is going to be leading out on Friday nights, but I don't have anybody that can lead out on Wednesday nights. And so we're going to take a break on Wednesday nights. I want you to continue to pray for us, but we will be back. And I'll give you the date on that at the end of our meeting tonight. But I just want to give that heads up that for the next 3 weeks or so, we will be taking a little break from our online Bible study here. All right, let's go to let's have opening prayer, and then let's turn the time over to Art. Let's bow our heads. God, thank you so much for all of your blessings. Thank you for giving us the technology to be able to meet together. Thank you for giving us the Bible in our language that's easy to understand, but also thank you for the religious freedom to be able to sit and talk about Bible things. I pray you'd give us wisdom tonight as we delve in deeper into the history of the children of Israel, and help us not only to learn about the history of the Hebrews, but help us to also find ways to apply it to our lives as well. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, I'm going to turn the time over to Art. I'm going to just mute everybody. So Art, you're going to have to unmute yourself. So Art, you're going to have to unmute yourself, and turn this time over to Art at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Looks like I got a share screen button down here, green button. If I'm press that, it's going to share.
So you'll press that, and then you'll get a pop-up window, and then just double click on the box in the upper left-hand corner. Mine says desktop. Yours might say something else.
Okay, I think right here. Okay. Let me see if I can share this.
Okay, it's shared now. We can see it.
Okay. Well, I want to show you this thing here. Okay, well, first let me say that, well, first, how do I get back to regular screen?
So I'll just stop your sharing for you. How's that?
Okay, great. Okay, let me start by mentioning that a few years ago, I saw a show on PBS that involved interviewing people that do counseling for families that are losing a patriarch or matriarch. Someone significant is dying, on the verge of dying, and these counselors help. And one of the things the counselors said is that at the very end, just before they die, these old folks often turn very prophetic. And that struck me quite for a long time. Then years after that, I've actually met somebody who does that kind of work, and I asked him, well, is that true that these old folks become prophetic? He said, yes, it's true. I said, okay, well, what kind of prophecies do they talk about? The national prophecies, world prophecies, religious prophecies? He said, no, nothing like that. They're very prophetic about their own children because they feel they know their children really well. They know their bad tendencies and their good tendencies. And so they come out and predict what's going to happen with them. That struck me quite well for a long time. In Jacob's case, Jacob, at the very end of his life, he has all these prophecies about his sons. And it is family prophecies, but it's also worldwide prophecies at the same time, because this is no ordinary family. These are family members that are each going to become nation or nations as time goes on. And it's good to keep that in mind, that everything that Jacob mentions, his predictions, can be seen coming true. And also the same kind of predictions happen later with Moses. Now, Jacob's predictions happen in Genesis 49, the second to the last book or chapter of the book of Genesis. And the 50th, the last chapter, is simply about his death and where they buried him and all the mourning that happened. Same thing happened with the last chapter of, last two chapters of Deuteronomy. Only this time it's Moses giving his last messages, his predictions about the tribes of Israel, and then the last chapter of that talks about his death and all the circumstances of that. So you have two old men who are giving prophecies, and it looks like a lot of times people just think, well, they're old men, don't know what they're talking about. It's hard to decipher what they say in here. One thing I can tell you, the rabbis have a fond statement. They say, there's no wasted ink in the Bible. And that, I mean, everything is important and purposeful in the Bible. So there's no wasted ink in those two chapters that have a lot of prophecies in them. Now, I could go to those prophecies and indicate the actual emblems that come from those prophecies, but you'd be missing the prophecies themselves that are really important. So Genesis 49 is Jacob talking. Deuteronomy 33 is Moses talking. Two old men who, people might say they don't know what they're talking about. But they They make a lot of sense when you look at it from history. They are the sources for each of the tribes of Israel. These are the two primary sources of symbols. There's other parts of the Bible that come into play as well, but let's just jump right into one here. I have to hit the button, hit share. Okay, as the opening remarks, you'll notice that I have in green, in red there, I have Jacob's remarks. In blue, I have Moses' remarks. And I organize them according to each tribe. Let's go right to Reuben here. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed and defilest thou it. He went up to my couch. Moses said something different. He said, let Reuben live, not die. Let not his men be few. And sometimes I put here in a regular color or black color, some portion of the Bible that brings a bearing as to what's going on. And Reuben went into the days of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. And Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, thy son's mandrakes. Okay, there's a little amount here to unpack. You can see that there's these emblems or coats of arms down here. And let me just take care of something. It doesn't work. First of all, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength. People have looked at the words in the original Hebrew meaning, and it means he was a strong representation of Jacob, and he was handsome. So the first emblem that came out was either a man standing strong or just his face looking handsome. That was the first emblem of the firstborn son. But the water thing, he's unstable as water. You can see they have a water symbol that also made its way into the different coats of arms. And then you see what looks like a fleur-de-lis, a French symbol. That fleur-de-lis is, I'm going to take a wild leap and say that it's actually a representation of the mandrake. The mandrake was important. First of all, Reuben went and found some mandrakes while they were taking care of the wheat harvest. He went to the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Leah had Reuben as a son, and then she was barren for quite a few years. And Rachel was barren all this time. So Rachel said, give me, I pray thee, my son's mandrakes. The reason for this is that in ancient times, the mandrake root was considered an aphrodisiac. It was also considered a cure for female infertility. And so that's why Leah wanted to have the mandrakes, but she gave them up in a trade in order to have Jacob. She said, is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband, and wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? So they bargained for that, and basically Leah did conceive that night and had another son. So the mandrakes are, if you look them up, they're mostly purple, but some of them are golden color like this. So what country do you think they became, the descendants of Reuben? You're talking about a country that is morally, sexually compromised, but also Reuben must have had deep feelings of resentment that he lost his birthright. And he has the feeling that he's entitled to be the leader. He was a good leader in some respects. He did try to save Joseph's life when everybody else was against him. But what we find here is that Reuben, the best country that can you think of a country that comes to mind? Well, people that have studied this said Reuben is the father of the French. French have been sexually, morally challenged, and they also have the feeling that they're the ones that should be the leaders of the world, kind of thing. So let's go on to Simon and Levi. So Simeon and Levi. Simeon and Levi they have instruments of cruelty in their habitations. O my soul, come not thou to their secret, unto their assembly, mine honor. Be not thy united, for in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they dig down a wall. First be the anger. So this anger is really a bothersome thing to Jacob. Moses has much more kind things to say about Levi. He basically says Levi is going to be doing all these things for God as a priest. Now, what happened was Jacob, Simeon and Levi attacked the people that were responsible for the rape of Dinah, their sister, and they basically had them get circumcised, and while they were still sore, they attacked them and killed them all. So they're very, very righteous indignation kind of people. Maybe that's good for Levi, who's going to become the father of all the priests and Levi, people that work in the temple. But and you can see his symbol, his coat of arms is the breastplate of the priest. Now, Judah is a very interesting one. Judah is, of course, a leader. He also tried to do something to save Joseph's life when they had him. One of the other brothers wanted to kill him. He said, he basically had a trick of, well, hey, let's not kill him, let's sell him to slavery. At least he sort of toned down what they were going to do. So he also represented some kind of leadership, some kind of cleverness in leadership. What profit if we slay our brother? Let's sell him into slavery. Now here, Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, thou art gone up. And he stooped down, he crouched as the lion and as an old lion. Who shall rouse him up? Well, the lion became the symbol of Judah. And you just heard me read that there was actually 3 lions mentioned. So some of the shields had 3 lions on them. Now, Judah had 2 sons at a certain point, twins. One was Perez and one was Zara. And Zara stuck his hand out, and the lady helping with the birth put a red cord around his hand. And the hand went back in, and Perez came out. Perez became the firstborn son. And the line of David and Jesus comes from Perez. But here you can see there's this hand, the red hand represents Zara, and the red cord. You see the red hand or red cord of both. And you can see this in a lot of different coats of arms with a red cord around the edges of the shield. Now here in the middle, you have a lion on one side and a unicorn on the other side, and you have the shield that represents the United Kingdom. United Kingdom has a harp for Ireland, and the other symbols are for Scotland, Wales, and England. And the unicorn represents Ephraim. At first, Ephraim was represented by an ox, but later on, Moses talked about the unicorn, and they decided they'd like to have the unicorn as their symbol. Judah has the lion as a symbol. So the makeup of England, basically saying, is Ephraim ruled by Judah, ruled by the royal family that comes from David. Now Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea. He shall be for a haven of ships. His border shall be unto Zidon. Well, here is a picture of the Holy Land after they divided it up. You can see Zebulun is right there, the purple dot. It's absolutely landlocked. How is it going to be a haven for ships? Well, it's not going to be a haven for ships in this original map. Later on, they come to a place where they are a haven for ships, and their symbol would be a ship. Now, to understand all these things, I think I need to mention a couple of things here in passing. First of all, there are many different ways that people traveled. These different tribes traveled. You know that 10 tribes of the north were taken away by Assyria to their area that's close to the Caspian Sea. And there they stayed for quite some time. Some of them came back to Israel area, but a lot of them decided they wanted to go somewhere else. They wanted to go somewhere where they wouldn't have to fight for their religious freedom. Traveling to find religious freedom there's a lot of history of it. It's not just the United States was founded that way. But these people, a lot of them, they went to the Caucasus Mountains. And you can find it, if you look it up, you can look it up on the internet. There is a pass there called Israel's Gate or Israel's Pass. The old maps called it a gate. And it's a thin crack in the mountains of Caucasus Mountains. And it's just wide enough, the old timers would tell you, it was just wide enough for a donkey and a man. And it took them months to get the people through there. And when they got to the other side, they formed a tribe, a big tribe. Now they decided to call themselves not sons of Israel, but sons of Isaac. And sons of Isaac, the term is Sakrasuni. So they became wanderers on the other side of the Caucasus Mountains, wandering to the west over Europe. And we know them today as the Saxons. Sakrasuni became the Saxons. And that's how Zebulun ended up in Netherlands. I mentioned that the other day. Netherlands is the most dynamic haven for ships. If you go to Google Maps and look at it, you'll see there's a bunch of ships, a bunch of inlets. And then you think, oh, okay, there's a lot of little ships there. If you zoom down, you realize they're big ships. The biggest ships we have are all accommodated there. It's an incredible sight to see. Issachar, strong as a donkey. Issachar's symbol became a donkey. I want to talk a little bit more about Dan and also about Joseph later. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Then Dan shall be the serpent by the way, the adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards. I have waited for this, my salvation. And Moses said, as of Dan, he said, Dan is the lion's whelp. he shall leap from Bashan. This is an incredible statement by Moses. It's a short statement. But Dan chose to live in a different place down in the southern part of Israel, but he never could conquer it. He didn't have the help from his brothers, even though he gave help to his brothers. And eventually he decided to move north up to what it's now called Dan. Bashan is the northern part of Israel. And here is Moses before they even enter the Holy Land, predicting that Dan is going to jump or leap from Bashan. Quite a remarkable prediction. Deborah in Judges, one of the judges was Lady Deborah. She had a victory song, and part of her victory song, she actually put a question in that song. And the question was, why does Dan still stay in ships, still live in ships? Well, Dan had a snake symbol, because the snake was mentioned here by Jacob. He eventually took up the eagle symbol. Now, I hesitated the last time I started talking about Dan as one of the leaders. It's one of the 4 lead tribes. I hesitated because it was too much to tell everything all at once. Dan did leap by ship. He leaped from Israel, from northern Israel, over to what are now Turkey and Greece. He leaped over to those islands there and those places there. Now, we know them later on as Mycenaeans and Trojans. They fought the Trojan War. Mycenaeans, that's a name that we gave to the Mycenaeans. We named them after their capital. But the name they had for themselves was Danoi, which means sons of Dan. So they knew they were sons of Dan. There were 2 brothers that sort of split apart, and one became the father of the Mycenaeans, and the other became the father of the Trojans. They fought a horrific war. Trojans lost. They became slaves. Several hundred years passed, and there was a slave revolt. And finally, they fought, and they sat down and decided to work things out as peacefully as they can. They decided to allow the Trojans to have 400 ships and take their men to wherever they want. So that's what they did. And those 400 ships ended up going to Rome. They became the Romans. Before they got to Rome, there was the Etruscans there. Etruscans also came from Dan. It's an interesting story discovered from people that went to this place in the middle of Turkey today, where people there had played a game. There was only enough food to feed half the people at any one time. So they played this game, half the town versus the other half. And the winner of the game got to eat. Finally, they decided to play one last game and say the winner of the game can go somewhere else and travel somewhere else. That's the Etruscans that ended up in the peninsula of Italy before the Romans came there, before all that started to happen. So that's kind of interesting to see that history. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Who has judged Israel more than the Romans? Who has been over them more than the Romans? He is a serpent by the way, an adder. Now Gad, Asher. I think Gad is Sweden, Asher is Ireland, Naphtali is Netherlands. Let's go to Joseph. Most statements made by both Jacob and Moses were for Joseph. and also for Ephraim and Manasseh, the two sons of Joseph. There's a lot to say here. This is, of course, the ones who were to be have the birthright. Joseph would have the birthright. Ephraim and Manasseh would have the birthright as well. Joseph is a fruitful bough. A fruitful bough became one of their symbols. Even a fruitful bough by a well whose branches run over the wall. The archers sorely grieved him, shot at him, and hated him. But his bow abode in strength, and the arms of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. So you might read this and you might think, well, okay, what is he saying? It all boils down to blessings to Joseph and his sons in warfare. But then also there's another blessing here, blessings of the breast and of the womb. That is saying it's a blessing of population. Of all the different tribes, Joseph has probably the most descendants, probably more than all the other tribes put together. Ephraim and Manasseh. Remember, Joseph elevated, actually it was in chapter 48 of Genesis. He elevated Ephraim and Manasseh to be the same level as his other sons. So his two grandsons he elevated to the level of his sons. And Ephraim started out as an ox symbol, went to a symbol of a unicorn. Manasseh, I don't understand these symbols yet. I'm still studying on Manasseh. But I can tell you one thing, Manasseh was regarded as the 13th tribe. And Manasseh, Joseph was a fruitful bough. Here's the primary symbol. But also there's other symbols here, symbols of arrows tied up together. Archers had bitterly attacked him, but they shot at him and harassed him. Now Manasseh, I mentioned that Ephraim is England. Can you guess who Manasseh is? 13th tribe? Well, a lot of people that have done these studies have concluded this is the United States of America. And the 13 number shows up a lot. And on the dollar bill, there are 13 leaves, there's 13 stars. Shows up a lot all over the place. There are 13 original colonies. Benjamin was a ravenous wolf, so he had the ravenous wolf as his symbol. Now here is somebody's consideration as to the different tribes. Britain, France, United States, Simeon, Wales, and Judah, Jews, Issachar, Swiss and Finns, Zebulun, Netherlands, Gad, Sweden, Asher, Ireland, Benjamin, Belgae and the Jews, Dan, the Danes and the Celts, Norwegians, Naphtali. And here is a vision of their different tribal coats of arms. So the symbols make sense. The symbols were honored by the people who had them. It was a way to find your way around all those large tribes and large tents. Each leader of each tribe had the symbol in front of his tent. So you knew where the leader was, and behind him was all the other parts of that tribe. So this is not stuff that's come from me, it's come from other sources. It's come from people that actually took the Bible seriously, saying to themselves, there's no wasted ink here, it all matters. It may be shocking to you because you never heard this stuff before. But God has his way of prophesying through his agents. And these prophecies do come true, even though we don't sometimes see it for a while. Another thing I would like to mention is that a word here about prolific multipliers. Basically, the first two paragraphs of Exodus. Well, Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, but he's very intelligently let first 2 paragraphs of the Exodus let the Pharaoh have a word. The Pharaoh is complaining there about how these Hebrews are such multipliers. They're prolific multipliers. They're too much. We want to get rid of them. Gotta put the babies into the Nile and let them drown. That kind of attitude. Well, a lot of people who go out looking for lost tribes, they think of looking for little tiny tribes. You've got to remember, they're prolific people. They became big major nations. They're big major nations today. Little tribes are. It means they're not taking the Bible seriously if they're going out looking for little tribes. You can find splinter groups. If you look at the Wikipedia on lost tribes, you'll find about 30 tribes there, all based on small splinter groups. And a lot of them know what tribe they came from, but they traveled out to Africa. There's a lot of Jewish lost tribes in Africa, as well as Asian countries. They kept some of what the Jews do. They have that as part of their religion, but they are not necessarily fulfilling the prophecies that we're talking about. So, any questions? There's no wasted ink in the Bible.
I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
If those tribes wandered for a variety of reasons, I've heard conjectures and theories similar to what you're talking about other places. Why weren't the antecedents in those countries seemingly more practicing Jews, practicing their theology and such? You don't hear that with, it might be just in the annals of time, and it was before recorded history in a lot of those countries, but I don't think.
Well, the odd thing, if you're talking about the small groups, the splinter groups, a lot of them do practice Judaism.
I've been in the bigger countries, the Danes, the Irish, the Saxons, like that, French.
Well, remember, they were scattered and they lost touch of their connection to the Holy Land.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that Dan, for example, was the first to go back to idol worship. That is very significant to me. It means they were the first also to leave the wisdom of the ancients, of the elders. Mm-hmm. And so it's an easy trip to take another step and come to worshiping Mars and things like that.
And they've done DNA tests in a way that I don't know if they can measure things from that long ago, but have they done DNA tests to try to?
Remember the Etruscans, they did a DNA test on that and proved that they were connected to that small town or in a valley where they didn't make much food.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I don't
thank
know.
you. I'm going to put a little stop to it, and we'll take up a discussion at 8 o'clock. Is that okay? Is that okay, Art?
Okay,
But I want to thank you for doing all that research and putting together the presentation. I think that was really interesting because I'd never seen the connection between the blessing of Jacob or Israel and then the blessing of Moses there at the end of Deuteronomy. I thought that was really fascinating.
two old men that you could say, old men just blabbering on. Both of them died after each of these statements about the tribes, and they were soon buried afterwards. So it's interesting how that worked.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, let's turn in our Bibles to Numbers 4. And we're going to look a little bit on what we talked about last week. You saw that Art talked a lot about these different names, such as Issachar and Gad and Simeon and Levi. These were sons of Jacob who had tribes or family clans that were named after them. And these tribes all pretty much are similar, except for one tribe, which is very unique, and that's the tribe of Levi. The Levites, we talked last week, were the ones that were specifically charged with taking care of the little sanctuary, the little tabernacle. And if you noticed last week, we were talking about how if God had a favorite color, it might be the color blue. And the reason I say it might be the color blue is because a lot is mentioned in the Bible about different other colors, such as the color white. But particularly around the sanctuary and around the tabernacle, you'll find the blue color is mentioned there a lot. And we saw where God even asked them to put a little thread of blue on tassels at the ends of their garments. And that was to remind them of obedience of God's law and that God was their personal God. And so last week we saw here in Numbers chapter 4, where it says that they are going to put, let's skip down here to verse 5. In Numbers chapter 4, verse 5, it says, when the camp prepares to journey, Aaron and his sons shall come and they shall take down the covering veil and cover the Ark of the Covenant with it. So the first covering over the Ark of the Covenant was the veil that separated the holy from the most holy place. And then verse 6, it says, they shall put on it a covering of badger skins and spread over that a cloth entirely of blue, and they shall insert its poles. So this was not something the Levites did. This is something that specifically the priests and the sons of Aaron would do. Now, the Ark of the Covenant was the only article of furniture that had the blue covering or the blue drape that was visible to everybody else on the outside. But I want to pay close attention to where it says here, badger skins. See verse 6, then they shall put on it a covering of badger skins. Now, some translations say badger skins. Other ones say things like sea oxes. And it's kind of a unique word that's used here. And what pretty much most Bible scholars and translators believe now is that this actually was something called a sea cow. And I just want to share with you what a sea cow is. So if any of you have ever been to Florida, there's something called a manatee. And a manatee is this big creature that swims in the water and that pretty much eats grass, eats algae, eats bulrushes, and eats stuff. And in Florida, there's a problem with the manatees because there's so many boats down there zipping around that their propellers chop up the, excuse me, they cut up the manatees because the manatees are such slow-moving creatures. And sea cows are related to the manatees. So I'm going to show you a short little video here on what a sea cow looks like, what they believe a sea cow looks like.
Can't hear you.
And they call these the dugong. And the dugong are what is called the sea cow. So I'm just going to show you a little video about this.
Some creatures here even became the stuff of myth. Over 3,000 years ago, tales of mermaids began to emerge. Many believe these were inspired by the dugong, a mammal related to the manatee and sometimes known as the sea cow.
So this is what they think might have been the covering for the tabernacle that some translations translate badger skins and other ones refer to it as the sea cow. The interesting thing about the sea cow is it's a herbivore. It only eats grass. Here you can see it blowing the sediment away from seagrass and just munching it down. They eat several pounds of that every single day, and they're pretty cute little things. The interesting thing that you'll find about the sea cow is there's over 70,000 of these off the coast of Australia. There's about 6,000 that swim around the Persian Gulf, and there's only about 17 now in the Red Sea. So these actually are found in the Red Sea. They're considered very endangered in the Red Sea area. So when you look at this, what they think possibly is that this is what is referred to here in verse 6 as badger skins. And if so, you're talking about a very thick protective skin that would be used as kind of like a leather or as a hide. And you'll see this as you go down in verse 8. It says, talking about the table of showbread, verse 8, they shall spread over them a scarlet cloth and cover the same with a covering of badger skins or these sea cow skins, and they shall insert its poles. And then verse 9, and they shall take a blue cloth and cover the lampstands of the light with its lamps, its wicks, trimmers, its trays, and all its oil vessels with which they service it. Then they shall put it with all the utensils in a covering of badger skins and put it on a carrying beam. So whenever you see the word badger skin being used, again, we don't know exactly what it is, but a lot of commentators and Bible historians think that it's probably referring to these large dugong animals, which would be a very strong protective skin. And you'll find that it's used here to kind of protect the articles of furniture as they're being moved. Now, after all the articles of furniture in the tabernacle were supposed to be wrapped up and taken care of, then that's when the Kohathites could go and pick them up. But I want you to pay close attention here, okay? Look here at verse 15, Numbers chapter 4, verse 15. And when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them, but they shall not touch any holy thing, lest they die. These are the things in the tabernacle of meeting, which the sons of Kohath are to carry. Then if you see, it skips down here to verse 18. Do not cut off the tribe of the families of the Kohathites from among the Levites, but do this in regard to them, that they may live and not die when they approach the most holy things. Aaron and his sons shall go in and appoint each of them to his service and his task, but they shall not go in to watch while the holy things are being covered, lest they die. So you'll find that God has set aside the Kohathites for a very specific purpose, carrying the articles of furniture when they're being moved. But then he also gives them boundaries. And the boundaries he gives them is they're not supposed to touch any of it, and they're not supposed to sit there and watch while they're being covered. And the take-home message to this this point for us today is God has given us a lot of freedom in Christ. God has given us a lot of freedom as Christians, but there still is boundaries for us. One of the things you will find in this Old Testament passage here is that everybody had a job, but also everybody had boundaries. For example, the children of Israel, the people from the different tribes that we talked about earlier, from the tribe of Dan, the tribe of Issachar, the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Reuben, they could come into the tabernacle courtyard, but they could not go into the holy or the most holy place. If they did, they would die. The only people that could go into the holy place would be the priests. But even the priests had boundaries. So the priests had freedom, but they also had boundaries. And the freedoms the priests had is they could go into the courtyard, they could go into the holy place, but they could not go into the most holy place, and they could not go in there into that whole area at night. Because if they did, the Bible says that they would surely die. But then you talk about the high priest, and some people think that high priest had ultimate freedom, right? I mean, the high priest could go into the courtyard, then he could go into the holy place, and then he could go into the most holy place. No, the high priest also had boundaries as well. You see, the high priest, if he went into the most holy place, he would die, unless it was the Day of Atonement. And so when you look at this, it's a reminder for us to not think that, oh, God will turn his head and just wink at my sins, or God will just ignore, or because I've been working for God for so many years, God's just going to let this one slide. No, God makes it very clear regarding the Kohathites. He says, listen, the Kohathites have been set apart for a special work. They're the ones that are going to be carrying the Ark of the Covenant. They're the ones that are going to be carrying the lampstands. They're the one that's going to be carrying the table of showbread. But there's boundaries for them. And even though they've been given a special task, even though they've been set aside and they're privileged for this specific special task, they still have boundaries. And their boundaries are they cannot touch the articles. They can only touch the carrying poles. And they can't stand around and watch the priests while they cover it up. And I was just impressed with this as I was looking at this. It's like in our lives, no matter where we are, no matter the position we have, no matter the privileges we have to always respect the boundaries that God has given for us. One of the greatest embarrassments, I believe, to Christianity is the idea that people in high positions can ignore God's law. You will find this in Protestants, where you will find Protestants that are embezzling money, or Protestant pastors that are sleeping around on their wives, or Protestant pastors that have girlfriends on the side. I mean, we've heard scandals in the past. And it's not just the Protestants that do this. When you look at the Catholics, you'll find that there are scandals that happen in the Catholic Church. And people aren't even surprised anymore when you hear about a priest or about a bishop or somebody doing something with little girls or little boys or adult men or something like that. But it's a reminder that even if you are in a, so to speak, religious position, there still has to be clear-cut boundaries. There still has to be clear-cut areas where you cannot cross. And this is what we see happening here as God comes and he says, listen, out of all the people in Israel, there's just one family of one tribe, the Kohathites of the tribe of Levi, that are going to carry my special articles of furniture for the sanctuary. But there's boundaries for them. Now, when you look down, you will find that the sons of Gershon, remember we said there was 3 groups that were in charge of moving the sanctuary. The Gershonites, they were going to look at verse 24. So we're in Numbers 4, verse 24. These are the services of the family of the Gershonites in serving and carrying. They shall carry the curtains of the tabernacle and the tabernacle of meeting with its coverings, the coverings of badger skins that are on it. Again, we see that phrase of badger skins because not only were the badger skins used for covering the articles, they were also used for covering the little tabernacle itself. And this would make a lot of sense because if these are sea cows, which I personally believe they were, these sea cows, they have up to a 1/2 inch thick hide, very thick hide. And so you can imagine after this has been tanned, after this has been made into a leather, it's going to really provide protection from the heat, from the cold, from sandstorms, from high winds, and then even if there was any rain that were to happen, they would be waterproofing it. So they're going to be carrying all of the curtains. And when you think about it, these curtains could be very heavy. If you've ever tried to roll up a rug, a rug is thick and it's heavy. That's what you will find when you look at some of these curtains. They're not these nice little wispy curtains that you can see through. They're very thick. A lot of them are made out of, like we said, the badger skin or the sea cow skin, which would be a very thick leather-like material. Then we go down and we have the duties of the sons of Merari. And the Meraris, they were in charge of, verse 31, and this is what they must carry as all their service for the tabernacle of meeting. The boards of the tabernacle, its bars, its pillars, its sockets, and the pillars around the court with their sockets, pegs, and cords, with all their furnishings and all their cords. And all their service, and you shall assign to each man by name the items he must carry. So when you look here, they were in charge of carrying the boards and all of the stakes and all of the bars and pillars and sockets. This was a very hard task that they had. And what I mean, I shouldn't say hard, this was a very heavy task, because these things that they had were not light aluminum. They were not very thin steel things. They were made out of gold. They were made out of bronze. They were made out of silver. And so this was a lot of heavy weight, you could say. So each of these 3 groups of Levites had their jobs cut out for them. And then what you will find is that we're going to skip over now to, actually, we're out of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up next week. Sorry, not next week. Next time we meet, we're going to pick up and talk about the, the organization that God gives the children of Israel before he has them moving out of the camp. Now, I know that some of you want to continue to talk about this, or if you want to talk about what Art shared, it's 8 o'clock. So what we're going to do is we're going to close now, and then we're going to just open it up for discussion. But just a reminder, we're not going to have Wednesday night Bible study for the next, we're not going to meet again. Oh, my screen is acting up. We're not going to meet again until the 24th of May, okay? So that means we are going to have 4 weeks off. 4 weeks off. Yeah, so next week, and then the next 3 weeks after that. So the 24th of May is when we will be meeting again on Wednesday night. Now, church services are going to stay the same. Friday night Bible studies are going to stay the same. It's just the Wednesday night Bible study that we're going to be taking a little break for 4 weeks. All right, let's bow our heads for prayer, and then we're going to jump right into our little post-Bible study discussion group. So feel free to join us with that. Let's bow our heads for prayer. God in heaven, we just want to thank you for the reminder tonight of the organization that you have given the Hebrew people to just let them be representatives of your organized plan for humanity. I pray that each one of us here would take a look at our lives, look at our bedrooms, look at our living rooms, look at our houses, and say, how can I be organized? How can I be organized in a way so that angels would love to dwell in my house and help me in my activities, endeavors? I also pray, God, that you would just remind us that even though you've given us so much freedom, there still is absolutes where there's lines that you do not want us to cross. And I just pray that you would give us victory in our lives so that we will reflect your ideal for us and that we would just be sanctified. Please watch over everybody here until we meet again. We pray that you would just protect and watch over us. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, for those of you who have to head off, thanks for joining us. For those of you who can stay around, unmute yourself and just let's have a little discussion or a big discussion.
and I need to
Hi.
know. I need to know about how they killed the people. Touch some thing for the tabernacle because it died, but died because of touch or the people kill them.
You know, it doesn't say specifically. We do know that when I can think of two examples when people did something wrong connected with the sanctuary. One was in the story of Nadab and Abihu. They were young priests and they got drunk and they went in and they burned the fire that was not sacred fire. And the Bible says the Lord's killed them. Then you have a man many years later, and while they were moving the Ark of the Covenant in a way that God had told them not to do it, they actually put it on an ox cart instead of carrying it on the shoulder of the priests. It was wobbling, so he reached over to support it. And as soon as he reached over to support it, he was struck dead. So it appears when God says, don't look at it and don't touch it, otherwise you will die, that probably in my research or in my opinion, I guess I would say, based on what I've read in the Bible, that means God would probably strike them dead versus they were supposed to be killed. Now, if they were going to be killed, God gave them different ways of executing someone. Usually the most common way was in stoning them with stones. And the reason for that is not one person would be responsible for the death of the person. So it was essentially the congregation would be instituting the sentence. And so it wasn't just one person that goes and chops off their head. It would be everybody stoning them. There was another one where, that's the main one where you'll find the discipline, or I shouldn't say discipline, the punishment for a capital crime.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Who else? Comments, thoughts, questions? Everybody's speechless tonight.
Sleeping.
Probably tired.
I'm sad that we're not going to have Bible study for a month.
Yeah. Well, why don't you come to the Philippines with us and we'll just have it over there.
Right? I would love to.
Yeah, we're going to miss you too, but it's going to take a little bit of I was actually trying to think of how I could still do this. I'm like, I still think I could probably, just zoom in from the Philippines. I'm like, because I'm going to be busy over there. So yeah, I'm going to miss everybody too.
Yeah. It's understandable. Just sad.
Yeah.
I just want to thank Conrad for showing us all these banners. It's very clear to me that I see it with these figures. I understand better. Thank you, Conrad.
It's always good when you are able to understand stuff that doesn't at first seem to make any sense. When you realize, when you finally get through it, it's an aha moment. It's a wonderful moment.
All right. Well, let's head off, and we'll see you guys Friday night. Friday night, we're going to continue our Bible studies on the story of Elisha, the miracle of Elisha. And so we're going to look at some miracles on Friday night. So I will see you Friday night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Safe
Good night.
travel.